Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, we just got done today is a Saturday scrimmage spectacular from Ohio State. We spoke with Ryan Day following the scrimmage. We were permitted to watch pre-scrimmage portions of practice, which featured some light jogging, some spirited stretching, and then we were ushered back away from the fields into the team room. Tom, what did you think about the scrimmage today?
Well, I didn't have a great view since there were about 4 walls between us and the actual scrimmage.
Okay.
But the individual drills that we did get to see were maybe a little bit instructive. We may have learned a few more things today. And then we got Ryan Day's take on the scrimmage, which was... I think the first thing he said was that he wanted to go back and watch the film, which
yes,
I think it showed great restraint for me to not just slide out of the chair and melt into a puddle on the floor. So that was good.
Well, that's when I smacked you on your leg, and you're like, "What?" Like, we had just talked about this. That Ryan Day's first answer would be, "I have to look at the film," and then what? Would we get anything? I was impressed by how much information he gave us.
Yeah, we ended up getting more than I think we were expecting, and
don't say that.
Well, expect the worst,
right,
and then expect the worst, and then be pleasantly surprised. There were individual pieces of information, and we were just sitting before we hit record, sitting and trying to piece together. Okay, we have these individual pieces of information, such as there were 2 pick sixes, and eventually we managed to get out of him who had those pick sixes, and then trying to work backwards to, okay, which unit would those guys have been on? Because it was the ones versus the ones, the twos versus the twos, the threes versus the threes. So Seven Banks had an interception. So if Seven Banks is repping with the twos, then that means he intercepted the second-team quarterback. Now, the presumption is that Gunnar Hoke is the second-team quarterback, but Gunnar Hoke has been going third in all of the drills. So does that mean that it was Gunnar Hoke's interception or Chris Chuganoff's interception? And the answer is
it was Seven Banks with the lead pipe in the library.
It was actually the conservatory, but that's okay.
In the updated versions, it's the library.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, let's start with the stuff that we did get some kind of definitive answer on. One of the first things he said when he was asked about who stood out, what unit stood out, he talked about the defensive line really asserting their will, which is really not a surprise. I mean, this is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the country. An offensive line breaking in 4 new starters, that is 100% to be expected. But then he said a name. He said one name.
One name.
One name. And that was not a name I expected to hear. Who was that name, Gerd?
No, and it's a name that we really don't hear about. And that name that Ryan Day said that we did not expect to hear unprompted was Baron Browning. And it was good to hear because we've talked about him in the past where he gets time, he gets to play, but you don't really see him, you don't really hear from him, hear about him. And today we heard about him, and so then later on I asked Ryan Day, what was it about Baron, where is he playing? And he said right now he's at middle linebacker, but he kind of moves around a little bit. He flies around to the ball. He has a better understanding of what he's supposed to be doing, and he's making plays. And he has all of the physical attributes you would want from a linebacker or a defensive end or, frankly, a safety or anybody that plays football. He has all of that. He's 6'3", 6'4", 245 pounds, runs a 4.5. He's the prototype. But he's never really progressed to having these physical statistics equate to numbers and production. And Ryan Day said that he's really taken to what Al Washington is teaching him. And it's just really good to see some results. I think he was with the twos last year and eventually started when Tough Borland went down. But that was more because of certainly a lack of a depth chart, where Taraji Mitchell was a true freshman, so you couldn't really rely on him too much back then. But for Baron Browning to have this better understanding, to be making plays, I wasn't expecting to hear his name because we talked to the linebackers. We'll talk to them later in camp. But for him to already be standing out after 8 practices That's a really good sign for this defense.
Well, and it wasn't just that he was standing out. It was that Day said he's come a big distance in a short amount of time. So maybe that is, whether that's the light coming on or something clicking, or, he talked about Al Washington in his answer about Browning. Maybe this is just Al Washington is communicating something to Browning, or teaching Browning in a way that it's clicking for him now, that it wasn't with Bill Davis last year. I mean, it could be something as simple as that. But this is one of those guys. I think back to, with Baron Browning, a lot of times I've been thinking back to Curtis Grant, who came in as like the number 2 overall player in the country, and had a fine career at Ohio State. It was fine. He was one of those people that you would wait to, it was like, okay, well, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And it was like, he ended up okay, but it wasn't a, first round NFL draft pick, All-American, Butkus Award winning kind of linebacker. And so at this point with Baron Browning, you're just kind of looking. You're looking for signs. You're looking for indications that, hey, maybe the switch is flipping. Maybe the light's coming on, whatever analogy you want to use. Maybe this is the time when it's happening. And that Mike position, that is a crowded spot, because you've got Tuff Borland, you've got Taraja Mitchell, who people have been making kind of encouraging noises about Taraja Mitchell in fall camp as well.
That's encouraging noises.
Happy talk, cheerful talk. This is and really we have happy noises are about all we can go on right now, because we have yet to watch an offense versus defense snap in any.
We haven't even seen any one-on-ones.
Right. It has not. We have not seen any kind of one-on-ones. We have seen individual drills.
Yeah.
And you can try and sort of read some tea leaves on who's repping with which, in what order. There were some kind of interesting notes on that front today, but again, there's times when it's like, that might not mean anything, because the first guy repping with the running backs today was J.K. Dobbins. The second guy online was walk-on Amari McMahon. And then you got to Demario McCall and Marcus Crowley and Steel Chickens.
Yeah, there's one drill where Demario was the last one.
Yes.
Or maybe he was the first one, and then J.K. followed him. But that's not the case either, because Ryan Day said they're still looking for a backup running back. And Master Teague hasn't been practicing. Doesn't sound serious. Austin Mack will be back in about a week or so. The linebackers, you forgot Schmeezy.
I did.
Ben Schmeesing at middle linebacker, walk-on, who was with the Twos quite a bit in the spring because of injuries. But it's a deep group that we didn't really get to see him today, but at least we have some new information.
Yeah, I mean, this is we're standing in the middle of the desert, and you find a little puddle of water. It's like, well, this isn't the
if it's brown, drink it down.
This is not the bar with the tiki drinks that we were hoping for, but this puddle is something. So yeah, it was. We know more, I think, than we knew when we walked in here today, which has basically been the theme of the fall. We don't know everything. We don't know as much as you probably would like us to know right now, but we're sort of gradually continuing to put those pieces together.
Yeah, and when I was talking to you earlier today about maybe putting together a depth chart, a lot of that, what I'm trying to piece together, is coming from the videos that Ohio State puts out. Mm-hmm. You can see who's running. Like if you see Jeff Okudah on the field, it's the ones. And then you look around, like, who's with them right now? Mm-hmm. And you try to do all of this deciphering, and it may mean something, or it may mean, hey, you know what, let's throw this guy in with the ones on this one snap. And then that's the one snap you see, and you're like, is Kayvon Pope with the ones right now?
Maybe.
He will rep with some ones, and so will... Jonathan Cooper, but he is with the ones. And you have to be careful to make these broad sweeping, this is fact, because they do so much rotating. And when you have this much talent, you should do this much rotating. And that was one of the other things that Ryan Day said. The defense won the game. There's a lot of guys there. And I think we talked to him maybe at Big Ten Media Days about the defense being better. And he's like, we just have so many good players. It needs to be better, it should be better. It has to be better, which further proof that he listens to the show, because we have always been saying that it couldn't be any worse. Tom, would you like to take a victory lap on the linebackers being already much superior to what they were last year?
I think that we can probably feel confident that they are better than they were at this time last year, because as little as we've seen this year, we saw less last fall. But
true.
Our filter that we got fall camp through last year was Ryan Day put out a press release with quotes from Ryan Day, and there was lots of happy talk about how great the quarterbacks looked and how great the running backs looked and how great the offensive line looked and the defensive line and the wide receivers and the corners and the safeties. And it was like the linebackers, well, they're continuing to work.
They're backing the line.
It was just like, oh, it was very much the asking Ryan Day if the linebackers were pretty and him telling you about their personality.
Yeah.
That was last year. And this year the talk is it's the same coach that it was last August, and the talk has been a little more encouraging. Yeah. And I don't know if we mentioned this, but Kayvon Pope was one of the guys who had a pick six today.
Right.
So I mean, you have, again, we haven't seen this for ourselves, but you're sort of getting these indications here and there, like the video of him with the ones. He had a play today that was one of the big plays in the scrimmage that Day singled out. So, read into that as much or little as you want to, but it's like there may be something there with him.
There was somebody mentioned on the board, I think yesterday, that Day seems too happy, too upbeat, too encouraged by the team so far. And they wanted to hear more like negativity, where there are concerns, where there are issues. And right now, the issues I don't want to say it's the only issue because it's not, but like the backup running back situation, he still isn't thrilled about that. And, he said right now it's DeMario McCall competing with Steele Chambers and Marcus Crowley for that backup spot while Master Teague gets healthy, and again, it doesn't seem like that's going to be anything. There are no really other. It doesn't sound like there are any other big areas of concern for him. Maybe depth everywhere, but
I would throw quarterback on that.
Well, yes. You're right.
He didn't talk.
I looked right past that.
Yeah, he didn't talk in a real encouraging manner about the quarterbacks today after the scrimmage. He had said, he has said all along, he wants to kind of know who that guy is going to be after 2 weeks of camp. So that would be 1 week from today. So that would be August 17th, I think. Yeah, August 17th. But by then he wants to kind of know who that is, because you want to know who your quarterback is, because that guy's going to be a team leader. Again, we haven't seen anything that indicates that that's not going to be Justin Fields. Gunnar Hoke again today was repping third on all these individual drills. It was Fields chugging off Hoke, just as it has been all fall. So, again, based on the limited information that we have available, it doesn't seem like Gunnar Hoke is making a big push. It sure seems, for all the world, like that's going to be Justin Fields, and they have to have someone there. I mean, they're not going to not start a quarterback. So that can be the starting quarterback by default.
Maybe this really will be the year of the tight end.
It could be the starting quarterback by default. It could be the starting quarterback because he goes out and wins the job.
Yeah.
But and Ryan Day is clearly hoping it's the latter, that Justin Fields shows them something and really takes control of that offense, takes control of that job, and really goes out and wins it. But based on what he said today, the way he talked about the offense, it was, the defense really, he said, basically controlled the scrimmage. And he said no one went out and won that job today for the quarterback job.
Coming into today, he wanted to have a better idea of who his starting quarterback would be, and that didn't happen. So, if you're looking for discouragement, that would be pretty significant, because this is the first scrimmage, and if he's no closer, maybe he said last week, that after that second scrimmage, they'll come up for air and really start to evaluate and see if there is a gap. So there's another scrimmage coming up next Saturday, to where maybe the progression, the gap will grow, and he'll have a better idea. But not a great sign today. But it's only quarterback. It's not like it's the punter.
That's something that's a position you can kind of hide someone, right? Like that doesn't.
Yes.
That doesn't.
It's basically the right fielder of football.
Yeah, that guy doesn't touch the ball that much. It'll be fine.
Jamison Williams, freshman wide receiver, lost his stripe after 6 practices. This was a guy back on signing day. Ryan Day said might take him a year, but then again, he might come in and surprise us and make some plays. And he did it in 6 practices. Garrett Wilson, it took 12 back in the spring to lose his black stripe. So Jamison Williams, today, Ryan Day said he made a lot of mental errors, which you expect from a freshman. But another guy who I asked Ryan Day, do you still get wowed? And it's not like he's a guy that has that kind of potential to wow, making mental errors. But him and Garrett Wilson playing that Z, that same position, I still wonder, and maybe with Austin Mack not being there, that allows for more opportunities for Jamison Williams.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you've got reps open, that's obviously an opportunity, and you're going to be repping with the higher quarterback, and the higher offensive line, but you're also repping against the higher defense. So maybe instead of going against a third team, you're going against a second team. So it's certainly an opportunity. And here's the other thing you've seen the black stripe. That's a data point you got to take into consideration. You've seen him in a couple of those highlight videos that OSU's released for practices, and that sometimes means something and sometimes doesn't. I mean, Ben Victor was like the king of the summer highlight reels last year, and then had a similar season to what he had the year before. But that's another little data point to look at. And the other thing that bodes well for him potentially getting on the field early is he's on the punt block unit. Ryan Day talked about the fact that Jamison Williams has blocked a couple punts against that first-team punt unit. So that tells you he's repping with the first-team punt block unit. He's making plays on that unit. That's one of those prerequisites. You got to do that in order to earn your way on the field for the offense. All 3 of those, you put those together, you got to feel like it's more likely that Jamison Williams sees the field in some kind of way on offense this year than you would have a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and that punt block unit is handled mostly, I think, by Keenan Bailey, the assistant wide receivers coach. They call it the dream team, and their goal is to block punts every single practice. And if you're making plays there, that's going to catch everybody's eye. And you get a guy that they like fast guys off the edge, or sometimes slip them up the middle like they did with Chris Olave against Michigan. And if Jamison Williams can make an impact there, that's an important place as well. The battle at right tackle, Ryan Day was asked about it, and he provided an update. Basically, Brandon Bowen and Nicholas Petit-Frere are rotating, switching back and forth. One guy goes with the ones, and the next guy does. Neck and neck, he said, and if they both show that they need to play, then they'll play them both. They'll rotate them. And we don't see that very often where you have a rotation at offensive line like you do at defensive line, because they talk about the chemistry that you need, the gelling that you need. You always hear about all 5 coming together as one. So rotating guys at offensive line would seem a bit odd, but they get so many reps in that you could probably you can gel with 2 guys there if they're both playing well and they're both getting a lot of reps. But I don't know, do you foresee a rotation there? They say that a lot, but it rarely does it happen.
Yeah, I don't anticipate in the first half of the say the Nebraska game that you're just going to have Brandon Bowen for 2 series and then they're going to put Nicholas Petit-Frere in for 2 series. Like I don't see that happening. Now I think maybe that's he comes in, the backup guy comes in a drive or 2 earlier than the other backups when they're playing, say, Miami, and they're up, the rest of the offensive line plays the first drive of the third quarter, but the backup right tackle starts in, the last drive of the second quarter, whatever, something like that maybe. This is a time of year when you almost have to make a little rule that, you believe very little that you hear and only slightly more than what you see, because it's very easy to say that right now, but when the rubber meets the road and they really want to make sure, when the games count for real, it's a lot harder to do that. And Ryan Day broke down the battle for that job in pretty much the exact same terms that we have, which is
obviously, Tom.
Obviously, you're welcome. Brandon Bowen has the experience. Brandon Bowen has been in the system. This is his 5th year now. He said he's come all the way back from that nasty leg injury he had a couple years ago. He has that advantage. Nicholas Petit-Frere, this is only his 2nd year, redshirted last year, but he has just the ability there. I don't think either one of those guys would probably argue with the fact that Nicholas Petit-Frere probably has a higher ceiling ultimately than Brandon Bowen. Right now, Brandon Bowen, it sure sounds like Brandon Bowen is viewed as maybe a little bit more of a sure thing right now.
Right.
And with this team, my sense is they will probably lean towards Bowen, take that sure thing if they can, as long as they don't need to slide him inside. It sounds like, it seems like Wyatt Davis and Jonah Jackson have kind of solidified those guard positions, so you can keep Bowen outside. And right now, Bowen, I think my sense is Bowen's ahead, and Bowen's probably the more likely guy to win that right tackle job right now.
But as we talk about it, I think it would make sense to rotate them and get Nick Petit-Frere experience in case something happens, in case somebody gets injured, because Brandon Bowen is the guy who can move everywhere else except for center and step in fine at either guard spot or even at left tackle. And then Petit-Frere has all of these snaps, and he's basically like a 6th starter, and you don't lose anything. So I think there's definitely value in doing that and getting him ready.
And here's the other thing. Ultimately, you're going to want him ready down the line.
Yep.
This is Brandon Bowen's last year. So Nicholas Petit-Frere fits into this offensive line at some point. And 2020 Ryan Day is going to be happier if 2019 Ryan Day plays Nicholas Petit-Frere some.
That's true.
It's very much like the Wyatt Davis situation. End of last year, Demetrius Knox broke his foot right at the end of the Michigan game. So at the time, that was like, oh, that's too bad. And that forced Wyatt Davis in. He started for the Big Ten championship game. He got that full bowl practice schedule as the starter. He started the Rose Bowl. And then coming into spring practice, all of a sudden it was like, well, they kind of have another returning starter there because he had that experience. Down the line, you're going to want Nicholas Petit-Frere to get as much experience as he can this year. And if he starts this year, the 2020 Buckeyes will probably be better for it. But right now, Ryan Day's got to worry about the 2019 Buckeyes, and that what's best for the 2019 Buckeyes might not be what's best for the 2020 Buckeyes.
You're right. He does need to worry about the 2019 Buckeyes, as we have told him numerous times when we've started talking about the 2020 Buckeyes. And he's probably thinking the same things, like, oh, crap, you're right. I've got this entire season. The offensive line, Tom, tell me if this is, I don't want to say crazy, but I wrote yesterday on Friday, like 5 things we've learned from the first week of camp. And one of them was that this is a very talkative group of offensive linemen, and I think that bodes well for how they're going to play. And now you might be sitting on the outside watching, like, what does that mean? Why would a talkative group of, a bunch of talkative offensive linemen, how would that have an impact on how well they play? But when you think back to the previous offensive lines, Pat Elflein, Billy Price, Taylor Decker, where they were open and would talk and would engage you in conversations, and the conversation could go in any direction. Last year's offensive line, it just felt like they told you what they thought they should say. And then as we get to past the bowl games, we talked to Wyatt Davis, talked to Nick Petit-Frere, some of the younger guys, and you're like, wow, this is the first time we're getting to talk to these guys, and they are different. They're engaging. I don't know how to equate it to, or why would that make them better players, but they're more confident. They like. You talked to Josh Myers. We talked to him at the bowl game, and it was like he's already talking like a starter. But some of the things he would say was like, I'm going to have to compete. I feel I am ready to compete. Thayer Munford is that way, where he is now a veteran, And they just seem so much more confident, so much more like they don't care what they say. Like Billy Price never cared what he said. Last year, a lot of the guys were hesitant or didn't want to say anything out of turn, but it's just a confident group of guys who seem like they know exactly what they're doing at all times, even when they're talking to us.
Yeah, the confidence is what makes that potentially a little bit interesting, because when you're not sure if you're really up to the task, you're not sure if you're really know what you're doing, you don't want to stick your head out, stick your neck out at that point. When you're Billy Price and you're about to win the Remington Award, and you've been a starter since you were a starter on a national championship team, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Everyone knows. Everyone has seen you not only do it on the field, but also do the work behind the scenes. I mean, he was the strongest guy on the team. You don't get to be the strongest guy on the team without doing the work in the weight room and all of that. And so that this is again one of these like little indirect things that you can say, why do you think the offensive line is better? Well, they're good interviews. Like, I mean, that sounds crazy, but it's like you can kind of put some stuff together and maybe
they don't seem to live with as much doubt as last year's line.
No, and and some of you never know. Some of that could just be individual personalities, but generally, it seems like over the years, offensive linemen and specialists are always some of the most entertaining interviews. And I don't know what it says about the personalities of the types of people that will get into those. The offensive line, and the defensive tackles too. So maybe it's just the big guys with a good sense of humor kind of thing. But yeah, just for some reason I always look forward to offensive line interview day, specialist interview day, because no matter who it is. Like, who are the funniest guys on Twitter this year on the team? It's Drew Chrisman, Rowan McCullough. I mean, it's the specialists. So, yeah, I don't know what it is. I guess they just have more time during practice to think about goofy stuff to do.
Let's see, what else? Ryan he loved the energy from the defense today. That was another thing, where he was asked, was the defense ahead? Is the offense ahead? He said that he just likes the energy of the defense, and that goes sort of maybe with the offensive line thing that we were just talking about. When you know what you're doing and you're having fun doing it, even if it's, especially this early, they're learning a new defense. They're still installing, but they're having fun. They're running around. The energy is there, and now you project that through another couple of weeks of camp and then into the season, it seems like the defense is heading exactly where Ryan Day wants it, where he's envisioned it, where you have this high energy, getting into the backfield, making plays, disruptive defensive line, linebackers being allowed to run, and then even just as importantly, the secondary is creating turnovers. And he said that's something they have really focused on. So the secondary, they got at least one interception today.
Two?
Kayvon Pope gets the other. But they also created a couple of fumbles, the defense did. And if you've got a high-energy defense that creates turnovers, I mean, that's what was missing last year. And especially the turnover part, if they can, I'm not saying be like 2016, but start being this havoc-making defense where the ball is not safe on any given play, and it seems like that's maybe where they're, it's early, but that's what they're seeing. That's what they're seeing, not what we're seeing. But so far, so good in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, this is the results last year, and the raw materials that they had to work with were just completely disconnected. That the amount of talent, the amount of speed, the amount of size on that defense last year, to get the results that they were getting last year, if you were trying to generate bad results, it would be hard to generate results much worse than that, given the skill on that team. So I would imagine that was not a particularly fun year for all those players on that defense, and I'm sure. I mean, you talked about Damon Arnett a couple shows ago about Damon Arnett. Like, yeah, people are in his DMs telling him to go back to high school. Like, That is not a fun season. And so this year, it's all new. It's new coaches, it's a new scheme, and you would think that the players probably have some sense for why things went wrong last year. And if they're not doing those things anymore,
right.
that's going to lead to a very happy group of defenders, and a very, and then if you're happy, you're excited to be there, you're into it. That all leads to a better mentality, more enthusiasm. Maybe you want to watch more film at that point. Maybe you want to go work out after practice a little longer. I mean, all of that stuff.
A lot of good soldiering on defense last year, doing what they didn't necessarily want to be doing, it sounds like. Even going back to something Jeff Okudah said when we talked to him not a couple weeks ago, but last week, where, it was like, Jeff, this is you now have your third position coach. What have you been able to take something from each of them? And he said what he took from Taver Johnson was that he could tell last year at times Taver was having to coach stuff he didn't want to coach. And so Okudah learned from him that, like in life, you're not always going to be able to do what you want. Sometimes you're doing what you have to do or what you're being told to do. And that was a lesson that he learned. Like, Jeff, what have you learned about being a quarterback? Well, he learned from Taver that sometimes you're going to have to do something you don't want to do. And it sure sounds like it wasn't just the players. There was also some of the coaches, and we've talked many times that Larry Johnson probably wasn't thrilled to not to be able to go upfield as much as he has in the past. And so now what you have is a defense who gets to do more of what they want to do, who understands it better, and as Ryan Day said, they read the things that were said about them last year. They didn't have to go searching for it. They heard it. They didn't have to go trying to find all of these things. Damon Arnett had somebody in his DM say, go back to high school and pick a different sport. I'm sure he wasn't alone. I don't even know if Tuff Borland is on social media anymore. So this is a group that has heard a lot. The chip on your shoulder thing, they each have one. They want to go out there and prove, and not just prove to other people, but there's a pride here. Like Jeff Okudah wants to be on the wall like other corners. They don't want to be remembered as the 2019 defense doesn't want to be remembered as 2018 Part 2. There is something to live up to here, and they know that they were part of a defense that wasn't good enough to win a national title. And if that's your ultimate goal, you better have a defense that can do it. And so there's a lot of reasons to be motivated, and it seems like each one of them they are picking up and taking.
Well, you want to have, Ryan Day talked about this earlier today, you want to have a balanced team. You don't want to just see the defense just killing the offense in practice every day, because that can mean there's a problem. He said it's been pretty back and forth throughout fall camp, which is good. That's an encouraging sign in some ways. You also don't want that just from a team morale perspective. If it is, you go back to some of those Tressel teams where it was just like the defense is just giving up 7 points a game, and it's like, we're going to try and win every game 9-7.
And then Chris Gamble slips and Lee Evans scores, and there's your ball game.
Right. Or Chris Gamble doesn't slip, picks off Zach Mills, and you win 13-7 instead of losing 7-6. It is that is the kind of thing where if one unit is just completely carrying the other one all season, you can get some bad vibes in the locker room where it's like, come on, guys, like we literally cannot do it all. Yeah. We're asking you to score 2 touchdowns a game. It was the inverse last year, where I'm sure for a lot of those players on offense, it was like, okay, come on, like we're scoring 40 points. That should be plenty to have the backups in by halftime. Like, come on, that should not be that difficult. And
the defense is probably saying the same thing as well. We know we shouldn't be giving this stuff up, but
this year, it's a chance for all the guys on the defense who are back this year to really show, look, that wasn't me. And that's not a conversation they're going to have publicly. That's not anything they're ever going to say to us. But they were part of that team. They were part of that defense. And this is their chance to say, look, hey, a lot of the same pieces are here. If the results are very different, then you have to look at the pieces that aren't here, and that may be why why last year looked like last year.
Yeah, and one of the listener questions was, can you ask Ryan Day why the defense was so bad last year? And, well, he's been asked that, and he's never going to give a group of reporters the real answer on that or what he truly thinks of that. All you need to know is that he has 4 new defensive coaches, and that should be a pretty sufficient answer.
Right. It's one of those things where you can ask a question, but actions speak louder than words. And the actions said Greg Schiano, Taver Johnson, Bill Davis. Those guys aren't here anymore. Alex Grinch isn't here anymore. So, and only one of those guys, Alex Grinch, had a job move that could plausibly be viewed as an upgrade.
Right.
So, at least 3 of those were the old Ed Warner, Ohio State offensive coordinator, to Minnesota offensive line coach. Not sure that was voluntary. So, you can read. I think all you need to read into that right there. Do you want to go through a listener question?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, the first one that you mentioned was from at Clifford MD 2112. Then that's been kind of covered. Next one from at Sedovadova. It's probably been covered before, but how will the offensive plays get called? Is it a team approach with Kevin Wilson, Ryan Day, and Mike Yurcich? Exactly how does that work?
Well, and that's something I wrote back in February, and I actually sent him the link, and you guys can go check out my Twitter and get that article as well. But it's basically it's organized chaos where Ryan Day is calling the plays, but he's getting information from Kevin Wilson about we could do this, and Ryan Day, or I think it's equated to how Urban Meyer would have done it, but basically Urban would say, don't forget, I want this run play. Give us a run play on this. And it's Ryan Day making the calls, but he's getting input constantly from coaches. And Ryan Day will be like, Kevin, I'm going to need, I want a nice, a good play action. Mike Yurcich, give me a good play action down the middle of the field. And then at some point they'll throw that in there. And it's just feeding him information so that he can make the right calls that he wants, at least after the first 15 are done being scripted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Ryan Day is the one who's planning on calling the plays this year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's going to be input. Those guys are not just hood ornaments, to paraphrase.
No, and they're all very good play callers. So why wouldn't you?
Right. Yeah, and I will be very interested to see whether partway through the year or after the first year, whether Ryan Day decides this is a lot to be kind of keeping track of. Because you got to remember, he's got to keep track of the clock. He's got to keep, he's got to kind of know what's going on with the defense at least a little bit, and that's a lot if you're also trying to call plays. So we'll see. Some coaches do that. Some coaches don't. We'll see how long that lasts with him. Next one from at Zadiah. I think y'all should ask about the linebackers again and then talk about it because it's been a week.
Well, hey, we already talked about it.
We did.
So
all right.
Awesome.
Asked and answered. Next one from at Suncard19. 2 things. How do you record your podcast home and away? And how many 3 and outs a game does this defense need to be considered elite? I'll handle the first one.
All right.
When we're at home and our normal Tuesday off-season kind of shows, and sometimes we do those during the week, during the season as well. We just record over Skype. We both have little recording setups in our houses. Mine, I have a mic, and I've got kind of like a egg crate kind of thing around it to kind of deaden the noise, because I record in a room that has a tile floor and just a wall and window in front of me. So I have the drapes closed to deaden the echo and all of that. We record. We talk over Skype, record individually, and then I will go in and edit it all together. And then we, put the music on there, edit out anytime Gerd says something he shouldn't say, which is like constant, just constant. And
I drop D-bombs all the time.
Defensive backs? I don't know what that means. And then we put that up. When we're recording in these instant reaction shows, whether it's after a game, after a practice, after a press conference, whatever it is, we just kind of want editing the podcast together. It takes a little while. Recording, then you have to send the files, you have to edit. It takes a little while. These instant reaction shows, we just want to get those to you a little sooner.
Yep.
Rather than drive home, record then, edit it together, and have you guys get it 6 hours from now. we sit down. We find ideally the loudest spot we possibly can. We find after
there's
game,
nobody in this building, and they're still playing music.
There's literally no one. I see
one
four
guy,
people. I see four people across the WAC. We're behind one end zone. There's four people in this building. They're like on the other side of the field, across the 50, and there's still music pumping in from outside. So we know we've found a good spot here. After the games, a lot of times we'll just find one of those booths up in the press box, whether it's a lot of times it's just one of the coaching booths, the visiting coaching booth or something like that. We'll go sit down in there, close the door, record it just so you don't have a ton of external noise, and also so you're not annoying other people, because if 4 different media outlets are recording podcasts in the press box, in the main part of the press box, that would be pretty annoying. So, but again, we always try and make sure we're seated directly under like a real powerful fan or something like that to really give you the full ambiance of the day. And those, Gerd and I both have mics on. They're just plugged into a phone. We just record straight into the phone and just post it like that. We don't edit it because it's a time thing. We want to get it to you. After a game, you want to hear about it pretty quickly. You don't want to wait till the next day. You don't want to wait 12 hours to hear a podcast. So we just get it to you as quickly as we can, and it doesn't have the music, and sometimes the audio is not as clean as it is when we're at home, but that's okay. It's
sometimes, yes.
So how many, the Sun Card's other question, how many 3-and-outs a game does the defense need to be considered elite?
I was thinking about this question just while you were answering the last one, thinking that I should have looked up like how many they had last year and then say more. But even the 3-and-outs are important. The more important thing is just ease up on the big plays, and they'll be able to rotate enough defensive people that it's not like they need to save energy by creating all of these 3-and-outs because they don't have the depth to play an entire game. But what's the average? You get like 7 possessions a half. You might get like 13 possessions a game,
something like that.
So I don't know what's a good number. What do your football nerds tell you is like 4 or 5 3-and-outs? Is that?
I mean, if you can get 4 or 5 at least, that would be, you're gonna have more than that against some of the worst competition. But against teams with a pulse, the average, if you average maybe 5, 6 3-and-outs against Big Ten competition on the whole, that's pretty respectable. And there are going to be games where you have more than that. You could have 8, 10 in some games, but you're not gonna just hold the opponent 3-and-out every time. And because you remember, if the opponent gets one 12-yard run and then goes 3-and-out, that's not a 3-and-out.
Yeah.
So I think it's realistic to expect 2 to 3 per half, pretty much every game, and more than that. Do you want to be elite? Sure, get that to 4 or 5. Turn it over, and that's when those are the games where you really can see scores rolling up.
Some of those 3-and-outs are just going to be a bad pass on 3rd down.
Sure,
and it's not even the defense doing it for you.
But the defense does get to stand up and signal incomplete anyway. Next one from @Bob_the_Buckeye. Would Ryan Day ever favor a night game against Michigan?
It sure doesn't sound like it.
I think that I don't think that's ever going to happen for several reasons. First of all, it sure seems like the trend that Fox is doing with their Big Ten broadcast is towards big games at noon. It has always been a noon game, basically, except the old people right now are yelling at me. Well, it used to be a 1 o'clock game. Like, okay. Functionally, for the last 20 years, it's basically always been a noon game, except for 2006, I think, was maybe it.
There's a 3:30.
Yeah. But that's basically it. That is, the tradition is that it's noon. I don't think you really need Ohio State and Michigan fans getting a whole day of drinking in before that game to, I think there's some other stuff that might make that a little bit dicey. And, that is, as from a recruiting perspective, the noon games are always a little bit dicey because it's like, okay, well, is the crowd really going to be into it? Are they going to be half asleep? Let me know the next time an Ohio State-Michigan crowd is dead. There's also the difficulty of getting recruits in Friday night, getting them. That's a quick turnaround for
a game to get into Columbus and then get your hotel. But there are better things to be doing during that game for coaches than recruiting. Anyway, like before that game.
Yeah.
So no, I don't ever expect it unless it would be TV driven, not coach driven.
Right. Yeah. And the coaches don't actually get a choice on a lot of this stuff. I mean, you look at how many times they've played on the road at night recent years. Urban Meyer was not shy about letting you know he did not care for that at all, but it kept happening.
Yeah, and this is Ryan Day, who was asked if he's going to change anything about what they do for Michigan, and he's like, why? So, he's okay with the status quo right now.
A lot of questions. 3 or 4 people asked about background noise. At Suckett Sports, can anything top the tractor with a blow dryer? I think that's our champion. Until they drive the equipment truck out onto the indoor field during a game and start unloading pots and pans or something, like I don't think we're going to top the tractor pulling the big brush to brush the indoor field turf.
It's after games they're cleaning the press box when we're doing our post game, so I have to make sure the guys doing the vacuums don't come in. Mm-hmm. So maybe a tractor coming up through the press box, and bursting through the door. But that was an all-timer. We were sitting over on the bench, and I pointed over at it to Tom, and we're just like, that's expected. How expected?
How on brand. Extremely, extremely on brand.
But today is Saturday, so there's not as many people around, I guess, right?
Yeah.
It's just music for no reason.
Yes. That's it. We're done with listener questions.
All right, then that means, Tom, we're done with the show.
Oh, wonderful. Let's go. Unless you want to go walk out to the outdoor field and pick up the music a little louder, we can do that.
We could record right under the speakers. So thank you all for listening. I hope you don't mind this second show. It was Tom's idea. If you do mind it,
I'm so sorry.
So thank you all for listening. We will get back to you Wednesday.
We have Wednesday this week.
Right, yeah. So we might record on Wednesday. We'll record on Wednesday then, because we will have coaches and players, and really we won't talk to anybody until Wednesday anyway, so there's no sense in recording on Tuesday. So we will see you guys midweek next week, perhaps another one of these ambiance-filled shows. So take it easy. Have a good one.